So Cal Esports has an Overwatch team. And I don't know if I ever mentioned...
Shen Yun was the perfect fucking transition for Cal Esports.
And if I can, I'm gonna write a piece of being like, what do you think of Shen Yun? But yeah, they have a team. I started covering them, like their first game. I've been keeping up with them. And I think looking at Cal Esports and just how they've grown as a team and, just actually getting to see a team close up, and Taylor can attest to this, is actually getting to see a team close up kind of going through it is... Obviously, it's not like watching the Overwatch League and being able to be so close to it, but you really get a perspective on, how much of shit never goes as planned as a team. And sometimes when things go wrong, it's never simply because, this team is bad. It's because there are 1,000 other factors that are contributing to what's happening right now. And getting to see that close up exemplifies that. Because now, at the beginning of the season, Cal Esports was abhorrently bad.
Yeah, and it's interesting to be able to watch, because it's not like we really know the players of Cal Esports. It's like we know the players of the San Francisco Shock, but not like personally. But it's fun listening to a coach of a team talk through the struggles of that team.
Yeah. It's nice to, actually hear coverage of what's going on with the team. Yeah,
and it's interesting because now Cal Esports is kind of clicking on all cylinders. They're winning ever since they got destroyed by like UCI. I feel like the team leveled up and they made a really good show of themselves at the end of the Varsity Invitational. They didn't end up winning, but they almost made it to the round of 16. They had a reverse sweep, which they would have never been able to do at the beginning of the year.
As we know, reverse sweeps are very rare, and when they happen, it's talked about.
Yes, and when it happens, it's Boston.
Yeah.
But since the Varsity Invitational, which I think concluded in October, somewhere around there,
something.
They've been on to, I have to confirm with the coach, but every single time I text him, he's like, "We won our games this weekend." So they're on a win streak. They're dominating teams 2-0. They're having very little trouble. And I just talked to the coach, and he was telling me the team is practicing a lot more. They put in a lot of work during Thanksgiving break. They're duoing more in ladder, and it seems like the team is really coming together, and it's showing itself within wins. And it's just another thing which is an underrated aspect is, I remember during an interview, I told him, I think it was the interview we had when I was with Taylor and we were reviewing his scrims, and I was telling him, I was like, once your team gets a taste of winning, it's going to be contagious and they're going to want it more. And that's when the team is going to really start clicking. They just need to get that feeling of win, because they were on a 6-game losing streak at that point.
Yes.
And it was looking bad, and you could tell the team was just like, they need that first win.
It's like anyone who's never been involved with anything and going into a sport or an activity and being like, this is competitive, but they don't understand that until they see the immenseness of it, like going to a competition or going to an event where you're like, this is how we're supposed to act at an event. We should be more attuned to practice, more focused. I want to play football, but I can't because my sports are my schoolwork is bad, and that happens through middle school all the way through college. If you don't have the correct academics, you can't play the sport no matter how good you are at the sport. So I think there's certain teams and certain things where it's like they won't understand until they get either a taste of true winning or a taste of true competition.
Yeah, and then they picked up, a couple wins, and then you can see okay, you guys are kind of figuring things out. And then they go into the Varsity Invitational, they lose horribly to UCI, which is the most dominant one of the most dominant collegiate teams in the country.
I mean, they pick up people to just play Overwatch.
Yeah, and after that, you could tell things started kind of clicking, and they start putting together wins, and you just need that taste of winning, and that's kind of exemplifies why a winning culture is so important, because, you look at teams like the Shock and the Vancouver Titans, they're going to have that kind of winning mentality with them forever. You know, that's going to be something that this player's going to keep with them. But you look at other teams that struggled with getting that winning mentality, like Washington, where they just couldn't get a win. And
Shanghai.
Yes, and it hurt. But then, once they got that taste of winning, especially Washington, once they picked up that, like, first real good win, and you're like, oh, they're onto something.
Yes.
It started rolling.
Clicking.
Yeah, and they just started playing with just, like, this reckless confidence of no one can stop us, and that's so important. And so, looking at teams like Dallas, who at this point doesn't have a winning culture, that's super important, is to build just...
That one.
LA too.
Just a structure of, LA.
Especially after the last season. LA was very dominant in the very first season of Overwatch League, but last year they struggled so hard, and with like 68 days until the league starts back up again and we start being able to see matches again. Yeah. I can see Valiant having this huge like need for that confidence win, especially since they didn't win their quote-unquote homestand.
Yeah. And LA's team this year is going to be so young and so inexperienced and so full of people that either have little Overwatch League experience or like straight up no Overwatch League experience. So it's going to be interesting to see if that young team can develop a winning culture and develop something that they can build off of and catapult, because you see this a lot with young teams. I mean, they can go one of two ways. They can be the New York Knicks, which just suck, or they can move into this scrappy Sacramento Kings, Charlotte Hornets kind of vibe.
Young Guns kind of.
Yeah, where like they're not winning the title, but any given day they're going to play you hard, and they have a mentality of wanting to win, and that's important. So I think it's interesting to see where the Valiant go from that. But, you know, just another thing is you look at Cal and that Overwatch team, I also feel like at a certain point, you realize being the worst team for Cal Esports, like Overwatch was, but now they're not, that's a thing you carry. Because Cal Esports right now is one of the most successful programs in California straight up, and one of the best teams in the entire country. Their StarCraft team is, I'm pretty sure they're number one. Their Hearthstone team is on a gigantic win streak, and they're top 5 in the country. Smash Brothers, they're winning tournaments. Counter-Strike, they're undefeated right now. You look at all their divisions, Magic, Arena, they're doing like good. You know, like they're a good team in Magic Arena, League of Legends, championship pedigree,
etc., etc.
Yeah, all their teams are good as fuck. And so I guarantee Overwatch is looking at the Counter-Strike team practice. They're looking at StarCraft practice and like, oh, okay, that's what we need to do. And they start doing that. And that's, yet again, winning mentality, winning culture. Cal Esports built their backs off of StarCraft winning national championships. They built their back off the first Overwatch team they had win a national championship. And that's the type of legacy that you keep. And that's why this shocker going to be always good, because they keep that championship pedigree.
And again, talking to the coach and him working through struggles of like players on the team, where it's like him trying to really push the meta, and then him bringing it back and being like, well, what are you really good at, and what are you confident in pushing your own skill in? And I think that's also really benefited and like made the flower bloom and really put this better force on the table. Because there were early games where we would go to where it's like the main team is like struggling hard in the 2-2-2, and then like the B team is over here like, we're running May Torbjorn right now, let's do it, dudes. And they were having better communications, and I don't know, because we haven't been to a more recent one, but I would love to see how much more like
communicative
and like how less of one player's all the way across the room playing, there's 3 together right here, coaches over here.
Now they're more together,
and see if they sit even closer together, or if it's still just like...
And there is something to getting more comfortable with everybody and really figuring this out, but also...
And a majority of that team was freshmen. So
they're
it's
all
like...
freshmen. So they're still figuring out UC Berkeley. Like, they're still trying to figure out how to be a student there. But there's another thing that's very important is him wanting to let the players kind of dictate how these things go. And yet again, at the pro level, you kind of do have to be a slave to the meta. But there is something to
a collegiate level.
No, just even in the pro level, just trying something different, and that's what Chengdu does.
Yeah.
That's what Shanghai did to such great success. Everybody was playing goats. They said, we're not a goats team. We're gonna go triple DPS, and we're just gonna run Youngjin, Ding, and DM out there and slaughter everybody.
And it worked.
And I think sometimes teams are just slaves to the meta and just running the same bullshit, but it doesn't work for their roster. Corey, for example. Corey can't play Zarya. So at a certain point, why are you just going to keep having Corey play fucking Zarya?
Yeah.
Try something new. That's what Chengdu did, and it worked out decently.
That's what Shanghai did?
Yeah, so like, even in stage 1 and 2, Chengdu was going buck wild. So at a certain point, you're Washington, you're losing, you're getting dominated. Try something different.
Right.
Even if it's not meta, even if it's not optimal, maybe your player's just going to play better and gives you a better chance. And I think that that's something that a lot of teams could learn from, and a lot of fucking humans can just learn from in general, is just playing to strengths instead of worrying about all these weaknesses. Like, play to the strengths that your team has. Look at your roster and be like, what do you guys do well? Like on Cal Esports, Wellnitz couldn't goddamn play Reaper.
For the
She doesn't know how to play. She's not a Reaper player. She was learning Reaper first week, learning basic Reaper concepts because she is a Tracer player. And at a certain point, they're like, fine, we'll play you Tracer and we'll work around it. We'll try Tracer Genji. We'll try Tracer whatever. We'll try Tracer Reaper. And it didn't work out. But then at a certain point, suddenly it's like, okay, we got a little rhythm going with this Tracer thing going. We're figuring out the tank line. We're figuring out supports. And it works. Yeah. And I think you need to learn how to adapt. And the best teams adapt.